The views, comments, stories, and opinions shared within this podcast are my own or those of my guests, and in no way represent the views of the company or companies that I or we work for. All stories, events, and tales shared within this episode may or may not have happened in the manner in which they are told. They may or may not have even happened at all. The details have been changed to protect the innocent and the guilty alike. This is Squawk Ident.
You're listening to Squawk Ident, an aviation podcast dedicated to the journey and the challenges surrounding the life and career of Aviator Tony and his guests. Together, we will explore the many pathways to an aviation profession, the realities of what a professional aviator can expect in today's marketplace, and we share many stories along the way. I'm your host, Aviator Tony, an airline pilot currently flying for a legacy airline with close to 20 years on the flight line. This is episode 33 of Squawk Ident, recorded on the 19th of March, 2020, from the Aviator Sound Studios somewhere in Southern California. On this episode of Squawk Ident, I am joined by two of my fellow aviators that are currently from very different sides of the industry. Returning to Squawk Ident for the third time, you might recognize his voice from episodes 8 and episode 15. He is a CFII, II, and MEI instructor, a former Embraer-145 Airline pilot, a KingAir flight instructor, a multi-typed corporate captain, a major bird strike survivor, a loving father, and a co-host here on Squawk Ident. Captain Roger joins us today from his spectacular home in San Diego, California. I am also honored in welcoming to the show for his first time from his estate home in Grand Rapids, Michigan. He is an Embraer-145 Airline Captain, an all-conference Division I 3-meter and 1-meter springboard diver, an outdoorsman, a marathon runner, an Olympic Sport Connoisseur, and an expecting father as well. Joining us today, Captain Nathan. Today we're going to dive into Captain Nathan's journey in aviation, and then we will have a conversation on the realities of our current marketplace. The three of us currently hold 3 different positions within the aviation industry, and we will dive into the outlook from each of our perspectives. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show, right after a brief word from our sponsors. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the show. Here we are, a few days into the crisis from the previous episode. This crisis that surrounds us all, especially those of us in the airline industry. It is a stressful time, that is for sure. However, we're here to say that we will get through this in time together by lifting each other up, by checking up on each other, on your friends, your fellow aviators, and by reminding each other that this is the industry and it has its ups and downs, and it's been this way since the very beginning of man's first flight. Today, here on Squawk Ident, we'll start off the show by first welcoming 2 spectacular individuals that I have had the pleasure of calling my friends. First, Captain Roger. How are you, Roger? It's been a while.
I'm doing all right. How are you? It has been a while. It's probably been a couple months. Lots have happened in that last couple months, though.
Yeah, I know. We've talked a few times back and forth, some prospective job situations, and juggling around the industry, and things have really flipped on a dime, haven't they?
They have, without a doubt. It's amazing how fast things can change. One day you think you're doing one thing, the next day you're doing something completely different, and for me especially, having kind of looking for different jobs and everything, how fast that can change. There's a bunch of job openings and then there's no job openings.
Right, exactly.
Kind of like you just alluded to, that's the industry.
Yeah, it truly is. And also today, joining us for the very first time, I am delighted in welcoming to the show for the first time, Captain Nathan. Hey Nathan, how the heck are you?
Glad to be here.
Absolutely, thank you. You and I flew together many years ago, not that long ago, but years ago. And we hit it off right away. It was a very low key, very low stress environment when we flew together. And, things have been looking really good for you. Your career progression has really moved forward at a pretty steady pace. You've now a family man with a baby on the way, and just things were looking really good. And you had your flow through prepared to go to Legacy Airlines, and now everything's kind of on hold. And we had this conversation yesterday where we were talking about, well, maybe this is kind of a blessing in disguise because, if you were in a new hire class right now at Legacy and something were to develop into a point of, canceling the class or being furloughed, that would suck royally. So, it really, I think you sit in a pretty good position.
Yeah, it's kind of been a theme of my career. I've been blessed with timing. I got hired Sandpiper Review 2014 right there, and they were just finally starting to offer upgrades. They working on a new contract. They just finally got one probably about 6-7 months after I got hired there. And it just, the 8-year upgrades dropped and they're down to 5, and then they went down to 3. And for a while after I upgraded, it was, you had to upgrade. There was no way around it. It was forcing upgrades. Yeah. And now we're slowly getting back to, you can kind of pick when you want to go, but, I was moving right along. I was supposed to be, flowing at almost exactly 6 years at a regional airline.
Wow. So, yeah, and it truly does put a wrench into the system. That's for sure. And let's start out today with some positivity, and let's start out with your journey. Since you're it's been the first time that you're on the show, let's start into the show with a little bit of your journey, and then a little bit later we'll talk about the industry and put in our different perspectives, because we are 3 individuals from kind of different sides of the industry right now and a different part of the marketplace. So, and I'm really looking forward to that. But Nathan, let's start out with you. Your journey started out in grade school when you had that aviation seed planted. You ended up going to an aviation management degree program at Southern Illinois University. And you instructed there for a while and moved on to Sierra Academy of Aeronautics because they had a pipeline program that was catered to help you gain a position at a regional airline. In your case, it was Sandpiper Regional, for which you gained a position there in 2014. Later on in the year, that's when you and I first met, you were just about getting ready to go to your first recurrent, which is also your probationary simulator event. And, you kind of progressed from there. We've flown together quite a few times, and then I went on through my flow through program, and we've been in contact occasionally here over the past few years, and, looking forward to having you come on board, and then this all happens. So let's back up. Let's start with what that seed was. What planted that seed that you just decided at a very young age, hey, I think maybe I want to be a pilot. Do you remember that?
I do. For most people, it's somebody in their family was a pilot or something along those lines, and they've wanted to do that for a long time. For me, it was, I never really knew what I wanted to do. And then along comes 9/11, and it's just chaos everywhere. And, airlines are shut down, and I don't know what it was, but I just, I saw that and I was like, that looked like a viable career to me. I don't know why. Maybe I thought I could make a difference. Maybe I thought, it looked like fun, or aside from the, chaos,
Yeah.
it finally just presented itself to me, and I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. And so from there on, it just blossomed, and that's all I wanted to do was be an airline pilot all through middle school, high school. Had my first kind of introductory flight with a friend of my dad's who owns his own airplane. He took me up and we just flew around Michigan, and I had a blast. It was tons of fun.
What airport was that at?
Yeah, the airport would have been Pontiac. Well, yeah, it was the Pontiac airport.
Yeah.
So southeast Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
So Yeah, it's where he keeps his plane there. He's got he would take it down to Kentucky every week or every weekend or so to his place down there. But anyway, and then it was looking for a school. And the difficult part for me was being a diver. It's hard to find a school with both a swimming and diving team and an aviation program.
Yeah.
So I was recruited by a lot of schools, but none of them had the program I wanted. So I had to force my hand in recruiting.
Mhm.
So I sent videos to Southern Illinois University, Bucknell, when I was thinking about going into aerospace engineering. Sent some to St. Louis University and Western Michigan if I wasn't thinking about diving in college, but that was not really a question. So I ended up going to Southern Illinois University, and it was a good time. I had a lot of fun down there. I was the only person in my family to go out of state for college. So that was kind of tough, but it was just I had a good up and down career there. It was fun.
Yeah.
Quite literally up and down.
Up and down, pardon the pun.
Both with diving and with flying, yeah.
Yeah. So, and did the diving take a lot of time out of your extra time in terms of your academics, or did you find that, you could juggle both the diving and the flight lessons at the same time?
It became difficult to keep up with my friends who were progressing through the program at a rate faster than I was, just because, whether it was lack of airplane availability or I couldn't go, during the afternoon, or I couldn't go on the weekends because we had meets, or, whatever it was, I was behind that, but I was never off schedule. It was nice because being an athlete, you got to pick you get to pick classes first.
Mm-hmm.
So I always got to pick the most sought after flight block, which was 10 to noon, which was great. So I get out there at 9:30, hope to get an airplane, and then go fly. So
yeah. And so, here you were studying also aviation management. What was that curriculum like?
It was a lot of to begin it was like safety management systems and a lot of like human factors, airport operations. They went over, they covered a lot of the ground school classes for flying in that as well. It was a generic class. And as you advance a little further, it would get more into like finance aspects of it. And there was an air traffic control class I took. Just really a broad spectrum of all aviation related classes, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. And that program, was it a 4-year program there?
The management program, I don't remember. Yeah, the management program was 4 years. The flight program was 2 years, but it took 4 years to complete it. So go figure that.
Yeah.
And when were you in school? What year?
2008, 2012.
Okay. And you said after 9/11 is what got you interested in flying?
I know it's a weird.
That's what I had heard there.
It's a weird story, but yeah, I don't know why. It just something clicked. So
I can respect that. I don't have anyone in my family that flies either. Actually, I don't think Anthony does.
No,
you don't have anyone in your family.
No, I'm the first aviator in the clan. Yeah.
My dad used to fly way back when he was young. He was my age. He was working at a nuclear power plant, so he just had tons of money. He was single, living with 6 other guys in this 3-bedroom house. He just had money to blow, so he learned how to fly then too. He flew my mom around a bit, and she still refuses to fly with me. Even if I was on an airline, she will not fly with me.
It's too dangerous. Clearly,
it is. Yeah.
Especially she raised you. She knows what you're capable of. Come on.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Or what he's not capable of.
Yeah, it depends how you look at it, but sure.
Yeah. She's the only person in my family who hasn't flown with me.
Yeah, no, I feel you. I've got those too. I think we all kind of have those. Are like, I don't care. You could be a brain surgeon, and they're like, well, my doctor says I should go with Dr. So-and-so. It's like, but Mom, I'm a brain surgeon. Well, yeah, but yeah, no, trust me, I know the feeling.
But she lets my sister give her shots because she's a pharmacist. So go figure that one.
There you go. Yeah, but it's different. That's
second, third, fourth best, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Risk reward.
Oh, we're diving deep here, ladies and gentlemen. Diving deep in Captain Nathan's psyche.
How does that make you feel?
Tell me about your parents. Your childhood. Was it a happy childhood? So here you are. You're at Southern Illinois University and Carbondale. Is that how you say it correctly?
Carbondale.
Carbondale.
Yep.
Yeah, it's like saying Tarjay. Nice try.
Yeah.
So you studied. You did well. And did you roll right into being a CFI during school, or was this a program that you entered into after graduating?
No. So in the summer of my junior to senior year, I came home and got my CFI at Flint Bishop International Airport, and then took the check ride at Willow Run. And so I was able to come back for my senior year and be a part-time instructor, as well as a diver, as well as learning the rest of my curriculum. So that was a busy year, but it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and your diving took you pretty far too with your studies. You ended up, progressing pretty well in that. What was your biggest accomplishment in diving? Was it when you went all conference?
Yeah. So I was never a great diver. I was good enough to be in college, and nothing ever really clicked until the end of my senior year. So that's when I started actually winning meets, and then went to our conference meet, and at where was it at? Miami, Ohio. They were one of the teams. We were in the MAC conference, and I dove pretty well there. Was able to get all conference, and then went on to NCAA zones for diving at University of Indiana. And at that point, I was just so washed out. I was ready to be done. I took last place on 1 meter, second to last on 3 meter. I hit the board once on 1 meter. I was just done. I almost failed to dive too. So it was.
You didn't hit the board with your head, did you? Because that's, I remember, who was it? The Olympic athlete.
Greg Louganis.
Louganis. Oh my God. That was, God, that was the scariest thing I heard. And I watched that live.
It was my feet.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Jeez, you're old.
Yeah, I could be your daddy. So, which totally goes into another story, which we're not going to get into. But your first experience leaving there to go to Sierra Academy, what sparked that?
It was so after I graduated, I was working at Kohl's part-time to kind of suffice myself financially, but in between the part-time gig and the full-time flight instructing gig. So I had to, reapply at the university and get an interview, and they're pretty much going to hire you regardless. But
right.
So I got hired, started there in August of 2012, and they had so many students now. I mean, they were giving us an extra student. We were only supposed to have 6. They were giving us a 7th, but there just wasn't enough airplanes. I'd have students in the 8 o'clock flight block, the 10 o'clock flight block, and they couldn't get there early enough because of their classes or whatever it may be. You almost had to show up an hour early just to get an airplane. So I'd just be doing tons of ground with them. I was getting 20, maybe 30 hours a month. It's like, this is not going to work. I need to get to the airlines faster. I need to get my time. So I did that. I stayed there for about 1.5 years after I graduated. I don't know. I left in April 2014. So
okay.
And I was I was just kind of applying around just to see where I could go. I was looking at charter gigs. I was looking at anywhere instructing other than SIU where I could get more time. And I happened to throw an application at Sandpiper, and they called me the next day. Like, hey, you want to come in for an interview? And I'm like, I don't have enough time. I'm like, well, that's fine. So I went down for an interview next week. And they said, we've got a pipeline program for you. We can put you in it. You just got to go have an interview wherever we send you, and they have to hire you. I was like, okay, shouldn't be an issue. So they gave me a list of, I think it was 4 or 5 schools at the time. And we ended up settling on Sierra Academy in California, state that I had never been to. Well, I've been to once, but
where was that? Sierra Academy, the one in the Bay Area?
No, they started in the Bay Area, and then they moved over to Merced, Atwater area, Castle Air Force Base. Air Force just up and abandoned it. It was kind of neat. We stayed. One of the draws to it was free housing, or $100 a month or something like that.
Oh, wow.
We stayed in the barracks, and yeah, it was gross. Bed bugs everywhere.
Really?
Shared bathrooms that were super small. Yeah. They would bring in.
No, I almost took a job there when
it was bad.
Furloughed.
Really?
Oh, it was bad. Yeah. Management would yell at you, change policies, almost daily. But the flying was good. You get a lot of the Asian students who'd come over. We had them from China, Thailand, Vietnam, Korea, all over. And so they knew I only had about 300 hours to go. So they said, okay, we'll hire you, but you're going to teach a ground school class as well. So, all right, fine. So I taught instrument ground school class, and then they were a 24/7 operation. So I would teach instrument flying during the nighttime. That's when they did their instrument flying. So I'd go 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. with the ground school class, and then go 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. with flying up and down the valley, 4-hour cross countries. No, it was rough.
So you're doing a graveyard flying just because, well, they had their airplanes running almost 24-hour cycles.
Pretty much, yeah. It was rough. I would drink 5-hour energy at night and NyQuil in the morning to fall back asleep because I don't sleep well in the day.
Well,
so that's
you're going to have to.
I die early.
You're going to have to come up with a better way of doing that, because let me tell you, we talked a little bit about the schedules here at the Legacy Airline, and if you're anything close to what I'm doing, you're not. The NyQuil's not going to cut it. You get ramp checked and stuff.
UPS and FedEx went out the door too.
Yeah.
Yep.
But
you
get used to it.
It was daily. It was literally daily.
Yeah.
So it was tough. I just don't sleep well during the day, especially when there's kids running around and you're in the barracks, which it was nasty to begin with. So
look on the bright side, you were probably younger way back then.
Yes, it was.
Sleeping during the day gets a lot easier as you get older.
I can attest to that.
I know. Yeah.
Yep. So you ended up, how long were you there at this Sierra Academy?
From April to July, so just about 4 months.
Okay.
So that would be 3 months, 4 months.
Yeah. So you were there, a handful of months, and then you had the minimum hours to do the flow program or the pipeline program to Sandpiper, as we call it here on Squawk Ident.
Yep.
What were those hours? Was it 500, 800? How many hours did you have to have?
For me, it was 1,000 hours because I went to one of those approved schools. SIU counted, so I got to knock off 500 hours of my required ATP time.
Okay.
So I was restricted ATP going in to new hire class with 6 other people. So.
Wow. So here you were in ground school, your first ground school at a 121 carrier. And, at the time when you got hired there was 2017, was it?
14.
2014. So 2014, you were hired on. How was that ground training program? Was it very good? Was it difficult?
I didn't think it was too difficult. I studied a lot, so it helped. The ground was, there weren't very many of us in there, so I could spend. As my wife likes, she's a teacher. She likes to, brag about her small class sizes. So the small class size really helped. Honestly, it's nice because we could just sit there and we could ask questions and get in depth. I had.
Well, how many people were in your class?
There were 6 others.
Wow. So 7.
And actually, no, I take it back. There were 4 of them went to the CRJ. Mm-hmm. So there were 3 of us in the Embraer class. And I think they had there were 4 of us because 3 of them went to the CRJ. So there was just 4 of us in the class. That's it. And we were all partnered up. So
yeah. And so here you were doing your initial
upgrades.
And no upgrades. So you really were just, 4 new hires studying and kind of really made the class time very productive. Did you see, and it's kind of hard to compare because here you are at your first, but did you kind of see a noted increase in the pace in which you were absorbing all that information?
Oh yes, it was definitely a fire hose, as they call it. Shove the fire hose in your mouth and hope you can take as much water in as possible. So studying at the hotel by myself with groups was always a important part of that.
Part of that, and a lot of curiosity remains with a lot of the the viewers or the listeners that are, either CFIs right now or going through flight training right now, or even those that are just, interested in aviation and they stumbled across this podcast and they want to learn more about, the daily operations and the progression and the journey. And that's really where I kind of try to put my focus on the journey of the aviator. Everyone's got a little bit of a different story to tell. And, I'd appreciate you, giving us a little bit about yours, but at the same time, we always want to know where the challenges were, where the hiccups were. So did you have any like hiccups or challenges or difficult parts of that initial training that you'd like to share?
Well, to be honest, I'm just a genius, so I had no issues.
Yeah. So it was relatively.
Well, it was for the most part, yeah. I have a theme in my career when it comes to check rides and checking events where I have one slip up that is like, if I have another small anything, if anything else isn't perfect, I'm going to get failed. So on my checking event, I was sitting there with I think Bill. He was sitting there in my left seat helping me out. I was going through my event and doing an RNAV approach and setting up with flaps 45, and the limitation is 145 knots, flaps 45, right? So we're cruising around 150 knots, coming in for the, setting up for the final approach, and I'm calling flaps 45. He looks at me and he goes, "You sure?" I'm looking around like, yeah, flaps 45. He says again, "Are you sure?" And something in my head's like, what is he doing? Yes, flap 40, yes. So I said yes, and he goes, "Okay." Puts him down, and as soon as he grabs the handle and puts him to 45, I'm like, "Oh shit!" And so I grabbed the throttles, pull him back, and I continued the approach, and nobody said anything. And we were below 145 almost immediately, but they went down and continued. And the rest of it was towards the end of the flight, so the rest of the time I'm just like sweating bullets, like I got everything has to be perfect. Oh crap! And finish the ride and get out of the simulator, and he goes, "Well, we're just going to call that a slight gust up to 155.
Wow.
Because that's part of the limitation was you can, have gusts up to 155 knots.
Right.
So everything else was good enough to get me by. But like I said, it's a theme in my career.
Yeah. Well, and I know our APD Bill very well. And I enjoyed every single training event I had with him, but there was a common theme. He wasn't always well liked, and the reason was if he saw that you came prepared, and this is sage advice for anyone going through, especially your first time at a 121 operator or at a regional airline. Anyone going through, regardless of the training program, whether it's APD or traditional instruction, if you come prepared to your checking event, if you come knowing the flows, knowing the checklist, knowing the verbiage, knowing your SOPs, your standard operating procedures, then the check airmen, within minutes of you sitting down and giving a little hello and just a little brief introduction to yourself, they pretty much can tell if you've come prepared. And their first 2 or 3 questions in the pre-flight briefing, if it's a sim event or two or three questions into your oral, they can tell if you studied, because if you're just spitting this stuff out and then you get like one hiccup and you're like, I just brain farted, or you misspeak, or you have a little thing, well, hey, are you sure? Like what happened to you. I've seen it many, many, many times. You kind of like, well, this is what we're gonna do, and he kind of like, you stayed within, okay, because that was the regulation. The limitation was 145 knots for flaps 45 as a maximum flap extension speed. However, there was a note in the AOM, or the aircraft operating manual that we used for that Embraer, that indicated that you can have momentary gusts up to 155 knots and not need to ride up the airplane as an exceedance of a limitation. So being that your check ride had to have been going very well, being that you were over prepared, because as you mentioned, you came to the show ready and prepared. And because of that, he saw that And that's why he says, well, we're going to just, because everything else was perfect. And just to come back to do one approach for 4 or 5 knots, and you realized, you had a brain fart and you realized what happened. The light bulb went off as soon as the handle was touched. And he saw that. And I could tell you, without being him, I could tell you that's exactly what he was thinking, because I've been in the very same situation as a check airman, a former check airman. And many times, you're with a student or with a new hire, and you're like, are you sure about that? Can we look? Are you sure that's, and then all of a sudden, like, oh yeah, and then they beat themselves up. And of course, they feel like crap for the rest of the afternoon. But, you go out of your way when you see someone who's prepared, when you see someone who's really busting their butt to get it done. And it's really a great story. And I'm glad you shared that with us.
I think that there's a couple of other things too for some of the people that are just starting to go through training events. Also, with that, the opposite of what you guys are just talking about is also true. That if the examiner does not like where you're coming from, you are not going to pass.
Absolutely.
And it's almost predetermined within that first 5 to 10 minutes of your check ride. It's almost predetermined whether you are going to pass the check ride or not. And you barely started, because I know there's a couple instances where I've heard. I'll just make this really vague, but it was basically, this guy is not going to pass a check ride. Your check ride will be harder. They will make sure and find ways to trip you up and make you fail. So it can work both ways. And the other thing, mostly for the younger people going through it, unless something has changed, the examiners are required to tell you if you do not pass. Like in the case of your story, you put the flaps down to 45 a little bit earlier. If you do bust the ride at that point, they are required to tell you, so that you're not sweating bullets waiting for the very end. If they didn't say that you busted the ride, you have not busted the ride. Keep going, keep it together, keep it focused, because you have not failed yet. Keep it clean the rest of the way out, and know you're still going to be okay. But I think that's also another really important point to make for everyone out there who's going through their check rides. If something happens, keep going, because unless you hear them specifically tell you, you're still okay. Keep going.
Oh yeah, that was a huge thing. I was like, this has to be good the rest of the way out.
Yeah, and if the sim is moving, guess what? You're in it, because when you bust, they have to do it. The sim pauses, and you're like, what happened? Yep. I mean, granted, mark my words. If the sim pauses because they're freezing you and backing you up and let's do that over again, that's a different story. But if the sim is like comes off motion, the screens go blank, and you're like, well, sorry, this event is now over. Unfortunately, you've exceeded this or that, and you're going to come back. It's not a big deal. Don't panic. I've been there. I have busted. My initial FO, I think it was FO, PIC, ATP or SIC ATP ride. And it was one of those experiences where for 3 days, I felt like gum at the bottom of someone's shoe, that just like a worthless aviator. And it's not important to what happened and how it was like a simple kind of missed call. And my co-pilot, my captain that I was flying with for this event, was like a last minute replacement, didn't want to be there. He was missing calls, and that flustered me so much I completely lost my game, and I ended up busting a limitation, and the sim paused, and the APD goes like, I'm so sorry, so far it's been perfect, and here we can't go on, we got to stop. And I was able to come back in that scenario a day or two later with a training simulator instructor who was also the union rep for the training department. And we sat down in the pre-brief, and he said, right now you feel like shit, don't you? I'm like, yeah. I mean, I was trying to keep it together. And he's like, first off, don't worry. It's not a big deal. Your career's not over. When you go, you're going to get interviews. Don't worry about it. So you got a pink slip. Big deal. They're going to ask you about it. And as long as your attitude is, well, yeah, I kind of boned that up, and, I figured it out, and we had this conversation, and then I had some great training, and then I came in and I passed it. So that's what's going to happen. and we're going to make sure that happens. And when we got in the sim, he was a phenomenal instructor who really built me back up piece by piece. And when we came back together a few days later to do the rest of the ride, the rest of this, ATP secondary or second in command ATP that was required after the whole FAR-117 came off the ground. At the end of that check ride, which was basically half, I had half to go. So the other half of that check ride, at the end of it, we came out for the debrief, and both the APD and the sim instructor captain, who was seat filling for the captain position, looked at me and said, if only we would have videotaped that ride, that would have been what we show everybody. And I was like, what? And they're like, yeah. He goes, you studied? He goes, I read the report. I understand what happened. Doesn't matter if I agree with, the fact that you paused and had to do it. I mean, unfortunately it is what it is, but you did great. And so, like how you had that experience where, you kind of kept flying the airplane. You just kept flying it, and you kept doing it and tried to bring it to perfection. And that's what it's all about. Just keep flying the airplane. So sorry to get off on a tangent like that, but you had reminded me of that story, and thought I'd share that with you guys too. So yeah, I guess the lesson there is, don't freak out. Things happen. We're human. We're all pilots are human. Go figure. And we make mistakes. And there's two different types of pilots, I think. And I'd like your input as well on this. There are those that really give a shit, and those that maybe not so much. Right? I mean, you got those that really.
And there's the ones who are in between, I think.
Are there in between pilots that are just like kind of?
I think I fall into the I fall into the in between category, I think.
Well, you're a joker, but I know you, and I've flown with you, and I know the caliber of person that you are. So I'm going to call you on your shit right now. Yeah, I don't think that's the truth. But yeah, there are those that they're making a concerted effort.
You flew with me as an FO, all right?
Oh, things are different now?
I'm a captain now.
Oh, so now you're even more responsible. Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah.
Our responsibility went out the window. Yep. I totally get it. So let's talk about the first time you and I met. Do you remember that day at Sandpiper Regional when I got paired up with this young FO, and the first reaction I got was like getting slapped in the face. Oh my God, am I babysitting? What's going on here? Do they actually let you fly airplanes? Did you have a note from your mommy? What the hell? You're this young aviator. He's like, hey, what's going on? I'm Nathan. I'm going to be flying with you. And I was pretty taken aback. I'm pretty young. What was your reaction?
Man, honestly, it kind of went, being so new at this airline, I was just like, well, here's another guy. I just got to get through it, figure out what he's like, figure out if he's a hard ass or if he's easygoing, what I can get away with, what I can't.
And here you are, you got a hot mic and an open forum. And what's the truth? How did you really feel?
I honestly, I don't really remember much until we did that, until you helped me out with that RNAV, because we went up to like Wisconsin somewhere, and I was talking to you about, I had my Proby ride coming up, and you were like, oh, I'm check airman, I can help you out with this. And I was like, sweet. And he goes, what do you help with?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. I know that you were saying how you were going to recurrent soon, and that you hadn't shot an RNAV approach since the sim, and we're like, well, it's DFR, let's request it, practice approach, and the controllers out here, they're more than happy to oblige because they get to log it in their logbook too.
Yeah, so we were talking about it on the way back from La Crosse or wherever in Wisconsin, and then we went to Kalamazoo, and they happened to be landing on 17, which is their RNAV. And so
it was Kalamazoo.
Kind of walked me through it. It was pretty sketchy, and but I still remember I went into that Proby ride, and I was like, okay, Anthony said do this, and it was great. It went well. So
yeah, well, good.
Yeah, so I was very thankful.
Well, thank you for saying so. You and I flew together that time. We hit it off, and then I think we flew together not soon after that. Couple times we had,
Right.
I think we got stuck somewhere once where the flight canceled and we ended up on an overnight. I went for a run together. That's when I thought we started running together. But
Yeah. Where?
memory serves me correctly.
I don't remember where it was, but yeah, we said you were a runner, and I knew I was. Obviously, I was too. I was much faster, and you run circles around you. I was
You
like,
were,
We're
but
just basically walking right now.
you're also almost half my age, so thank you very much. So for this old man to be keeping up with you, hey, I got to tell you, I'm going to look at it that way. At least.
I was walking.
You were walking. You're like, come on, man, this is my walking pace. You jerk. So, here, we've flown together a few times and we've kept up over the years, and we've kind of helped each other out, both with aviation and, with our personal lives as well. And I've always kind of, reached out to you, and you've reached out to me a few times, and it really has been a nice to have someone in the industry you can talk to and kind of talk about life and about all the struggles that come along with the job. But so then I moved on. I went on to Legacy Airlines through the flow-through agreement a couple of years back, and you stayed on and not long after upgraded. Can you tell me a little bit about that upgrade process over at Sandpiper?
Yeah, I was one of the last upgrade classes to really be able to choose when they wanted to upgrade. So I held off until I could hold the Embraer in Chicago. So I could have held Dallas before anything else, which was really weird. So I held off, and then I finally I was awarded it and got it. And I pushed it back because I had a vacation conflict. So my wife, then girlfriend, went down to Miami for a weekend, came back, and off to training I went. So did the little dinner thing. It was kind of interesting. Got my wings there, and then went through training, and I was the only one in my class. Yeah, the only upgrade Embraer in my class.
And you did the qualified upgrade. What's that program all about?
Yes. Well, it's changed now. It's become an AQP. I was before they changed it. Right before they changed it. So it was like a week and a half or so of ground, maybe 2 weeks of ground, where they cover all the systems, and then they do some. I'm trying to remember. It just kind of flew by. It was fairly easy.
Yeah, I think they do like a couple days of what they called Captain Charm School. It wasn't really a FAA mandated class. It was more that the company kind of put together a day of all the things you can expect as a captain, and this is how we expect you to kind of handle these particular scenarios.
That was actually at the end of my ground school training, because they canceled that class because I was going to be the only one in it. So I went through all of my ground school, passed my check, passed my oral, and then I was in the Captain Charm School. So that was interesting.
Yeah. And do you remember what you kind of covered in that Charm School?
Pretty much all of the operational, the FM1, it's just how the airline works, making sure you understand the rules and, the daily operations and, the situations that you might get into. This is where you can find it, et cetera, et cetera. So. Okay.
And then your upgrade class, because it was a qualified upgrade, it wasn't a long-term learning a new airplane. You already were in that right seat for hundreds, if not thousands of hours over the years. And now all you basically were doing is changing seats. So you had your couple days of ground school, couple days of systems, and whatever other qualification classes they wanted you to do. And then they put you in the sim. You said how many sim rides or how many sim sessions did you have?
I was in Houston for like a week, I think. It was over Thanksgiving. I had my final ride on Thanksgiving morning.
Yeah.
2017. So it was I think it was a 5 sessions. That's what it was. Yeah.
Yeah. 5 sessions. And so congratulations. You got your stripe, you got your dinner with the company president, where you get to bring your significant other and have a nice little ceremony, which was really nice because I'll tell you, I didn't get any of that. I just got.
Mine was at the beginning, actually. So
show up to class and just show up and shut up,
Yeah.
So, and here you were, 2017. Here we are in 2020. Only 3 years as a captain. Have you had any harrowing experiences where you really earned your pay that day?
To be honest, I've had the luckiest career. I really have. I have not had any major issues. I have yet to divert as a captain.
Oh, really?
Isn't that amazing?
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, you have been lucky.
Yeah, I have.
Yeah.
Extremely. And I was talking to a friend of mine about this who's not a pilot. He's real estate. And I was like, what's that law where something will happen that should happen or something should
Murphy's
happen?
Law, or?
Yeah, Murphy's Law. Yeah, I was like, Murphy's Law, it's gonna happen at some point. Like something has to happen.
Yeah, you're cashing in all your chips early.
Exactly, I know, right? But he was going on a cruise later that week, and he was flying out of Detroit on Delta. 15 minutes into the flight, they blow an engine smoke in the cabin. He's just as a passenger. I'm like, this was supposed to happen to like me, not you. You don't even fly. I'm out here flying every single day, just about. So that was just kind of weird that we were talking about something happening, and all of a sudden it happens to him later that week.
Yeah. So he should have been prepared. It was on the forefront of his mind.
Yeah, and he wasn't. Yeah.
Yeah. So
he was crying like a baby.
You've been commuting now from the east side of the lake to the west side of the lake pretty much your entire airline career. Do you have any experiences?
The best side to the worst side. Really.
Oh, is that how it is? Yeah. Have you had any experiences in commuting that you'd like to share?
Other than self-inflicting commuter policies every now and then as a senior FO because I didn't want to go to work. Not really. I get jump seat every now and then. What's really nice now is all the senior guys who were above me, who have flown to Legacy, who were at Sandpiper. They get to get bumped off the jump seat by me on the Sandpiper flight. So
yeah, and let's dive into that just a little bit. So what is the priority for the jump seat? So let's say you've got 3 pilots in the waiting area, and you're on the aircraft that's going from Grand Rapids to Chicago is a Sandpiper airplane. And it's you, a Sandpiper captain, you have a Sandpiper FO, and you have, say, a United captain there. Who gets the priority?
Whoever checked in first between me and the other Sandpiper pilot, which really peeves me because I spent all 4 or 5 years or so building up seniority to be able to bump people off the jump seat, and here they are changing it to time check-in.
So it's no longer based on the seniority of the employee?
Not anymore. Not at Sandpiper. I don't know how they do it at Legacy, but at Sandpiper, it is time of check-in.
Oh, wow. Yeah, no, at Legacy, it is also time of check-in, but at Legacy, you can actually list for the jump seat. So if you know the loads are tight, I forget how many days in advance you can do it because I haven't been commuting in a couple of years, but you can actually list yourself for the jump seat. And they have you can list up to 2 pilots for the jump seat. So pilot position 1, pilot position 2. And that guarantees you that jump seat, regardless of seniority or time of check-in or anything else. As long as you remember to check in, you're golden. And you guys don't have that there at Sandpiper.
No, not anymore. And so it really pissed off old Commander Ted. He was pretty senior as well, and he still is.
I remember Commander Ted. Yes, he's still there, huh?
Yep. He's forced onto the 175 now. He complains all the time.
He's a lifer.
Yeah. And so, he's a nice guy.
Yeah. For those of our listeners that don't know what a lifer is, so you stop and you think about what is the normal progression for at least an airline pilot. And Roger, maybe you can put in your 2 cents as well with this. You're sitting there at a regional and you're flying along and things are all great and you start to get really comfortable, not just with your position, with your aircraft, your seat, but also sometimes your base. And you don't want to change all those things because you get weekends off, you get a good schedule, and you don't have to learn a new airplane. And then you start to see an uptick in the industry and everyone's getting a job somewhere else. They're moving upward and onward to bigger operators, bigger airplanes, just more opportunity, better pay. And then you get those pilots that don't really want to change their scenario. They don't want to move on. Maybe they're at a particular age that they don't want to have to go through the reserve process again. Maybe they just don't want to have that schedule. Maybe the pay isn't a big deal for them because they feel they're making enough money. But oftentimes they're not going to go anywhere. They're lifers. They're going to be at that operator until the day they have to retire. Roger, have you seen any of that when you were flying for the airlines?
Absolutely. And at every airline has them. And obviously we're primarily, if not exclusively, talking about regional airlines. Now I'm going to use the word fortunate here to be out of the airline industry now for over 5 years. So a lot of this stuff is something that I don't spend a whole lot of time thinking about anymore. But where I was, as I've said before, I used to work at ExpressJet, and it was a fairly senior airline for a lot of people, and we had a lot of lifers down there. For the reasons that you just were talking about, it is usually a specific subset based on a certain age. Usually, if you're under the age of approximately 45, you're much less likely to be a lifer because you can make up the difference. But especially I think with line bidding and guys that are getting four weeks of vacation, when you've got 4 weeks of vacation and you've got vacation touch, that basically, as a senior, even as a regional senior captain, you're talking about 4 months off every single year.
Yeah. You're
not on reserve. You're working 12 to 14 days a month. You can take 4 months off every single year. You're making decent money. I mean, it's not going to be what you'd make at a major, but at the same time, you're making more than an FO on reserve at a major. And so that's where you're going to get that section of people. And I mean, I certainly don't blame them for it. They've got a comfortable life. They know exactly what they can expect. And really, there's not a whole lot, obviously right now in today's world, even those lifers, they're not going to see a whole lot of change in their life, even though everything is spinning out of control around them. They're still got 4 weeks of vacation. They're still working 12 to 14 days a month. They still fly the exact same airplane on the exact same schedule.
Yeah.
And so I think that you'll always have that particular subset of people. And like I say, people are different. More power to them.
Yeah. So it's important to note, and thank you very much for saying that, because that's exactly the point I was trying to come across is it's not a negative connotation. I mean, a lot of times, especially the younger pilot group, when they get to regional and then they possibly, move on within a short period of time to a major airline or a legacy airline, or they move on to do something else, and they're constantly kind of looking at the other side of the fence to see if the grass is greener over there. And then they look back and they use, he's a lifer or she's a lifer as a negative connotation. And that's really not fair because, like you said, if your quality of life is good and you're making enough money to where you're happy and, because it's once you get to a senior position at any airline, regional or otherwise, hey, you're like you said, you kind of write your own schedule. You have a golden ticket to a decent quality of life. So, but we just wanted to kind of brush up on what that term is, because I know we kind of have mentioned it before in the show, a lifer at an airline or a regional, and I just want to make sure it doesn't come across as a negative connotation. So let's kind of pick up the show a little bit, and before we get into a little bit more of a Q&A with the both of you, let's take a look at what's going on in the industry right now. And we're not going to focus on the doom and gloom, but let's look at how it's affecting our brothers and sisters at other airlines. Now, recently, just a couple days ago, we found out that Trans-States Airlines was going to close its doors. And this is a pretty major hit. Can you imagine? And do any of you know how many pilots are at Trans-States?
Off the top of my head, no.
Trans-States, in an internal memo to its pilots, dated on the 17th of March, and I'll just read a little bit of it and try to get your 2 cents on it. In my most recent communication regarding the sharp global and domestic decline in demand due to concerns over the coronavirus, I advise that we should anticipate a significant acceleration to our drawdown schedule. At that time, we could see that our flying for April had already been reduced beyond what was previously planned. We knew that broader capacity adjustments for May and beyond were being evaluated at the network level, but believed that Transstates would still be providing some level of service to United for a number of months. United has been open and transparent with us each step of the way regarding the need to accelerate the original transition plan, as well as another network actions they were taking to try to stay a step ahead of the crisis and its impact on customers, employees, and the business itself. Unfortunately, however, it has not been enough. We received word late last night that the immediate cuts to our schedule are far deeper than we feared, and that the accelerated drawdown we had anticipated will be faster than we ever could have imagined. Due to the unforeseen impact of the coronavirus, all Transstates flying has been removed from the United Network effective April 1st. So, the memo goes on, but really this is a major impact to all those pilots, all the employees, everyone involved. And the airline is shutting its doors. And we have not seen this for a very long time. As a matter of fact, when was the last time an airline was not bought out and not merged? It was just shut. Was that ComAir? Was that the last time we saw this?
I don't remember seeing this ever since, you had a bunch of consolidation after in the wake of 9/11. And then, obviously that continued for a decade. The last airline I remember was ComAir slowly shutting down. That was over 12 years ago or so.
Yeah, it's before my time.
According to Wikipedia, ComAir was a wholly owned subsidiary airline of Delta Airlines, headquartered on the grounds of Cincinnati's Northern Kentucky International Airport in Boone County, Kentucky, in the United States. They were operating under the name brand Delta Connection. ComAir operated passenger service to destinations in the U.S., Canada, Mexico, and in the Bahamas. ComAir and Delta Airlines announced on July 27th of 2012, as you mentioned, the ComAir would cease operations in September of that year. And the way that happened, most of us that were in the industry at the time were looking really sharply at this, because what ended up happening was they slowly were drawing down the flying. Then the pilots, they slowly started to lay off. And then all of a sudden, one day, they just shut the doors and went, boop, we're closed. We had pilots that were on overnights for them that were in the middle of an overnight going, oh, we're sorry, get yourself home. We're done. We're not working. We had pilots that had kit bags in their operations rooms that were like, okay, well, I need to go get my kit bag, So they had to make plans and how to retrieve their personal effects from the company's business, and they just kind of shut the doors immediately. Now, this is not that, but what kind of notice is this? Is less than 30 days notice that the company is no longer going to be flying. And all those pilots, now's the time where we need to kind of reach out a hand and try to help them out, because they're completely out of work. Can you imagine?
That's one of the sad and unfortunate things about this industry is we eat our own young in a way. It really is a game of luck or lack thereof. You've got these people who decide for whatever reasons that they're going to go to Transstates Airlines, and these days and over the past 5 years, you could have your pick of where you wanted to go. You want to go to Transstates, you want to go to ExpressJet, you want to go to an American Eagle carrier, a United Express carrier, Delta Connection carrier. Take your pick. And for whatever reason, to Transstates Airlines, and now today you're out of a job. And yet, while 3 weeks ago, you could have probably decided to pick up and leave Transstates Airlines and go to any one of the other airlines that are out there. All of a sudden, 3 weeks later, now you're not going to have any job. You can't go to any carrier. None. Right. You're just going to be, unfortunately, out on the street. In terms of a job, at least it's over. And I think that's one of the sad things. And you guys are obviously, being airline guys, you're much more in tune to all this. That's one of those things that I remember the national seniority list, where this argument really can kind of come up. And not that that's necessarily going to fix all the problems, because no matter what kind of list you have, people are going to be out of work. The story gets worse. It just came out that another airline is going to be shutting down as well in the next few weeks. I mean, it's not just one, it's now two. And is it going to be three or four? And you're going to have all these people that are going to be looking for work. And unfortunately, like I said, even as recently as 3 weeks ago, where you could have gone to 12 different carriers, now you're going to be out of a job. And it's just an odd, strange industry that's something unto itself.
Yeah.
Unlike almost anything else that I can think of.
Yeah, I mean, it really is a trying time, and we're all very nervous. I mean, every single pilot that I've reached out to in the last 72 hours, and I've been pretty nonstop with the texting and the phone calls, and just to make sure that my fellow aviators are okay and how they're doing. And now's the time more than ever. Even I did not live through the 9/11 disaster while being in the airline industry. It was prior to I was flying, but it was all GA stuff at the time. As Nathan mentioned earlier, that event kind of sparked his interest. Like, oh man, look at all these guys suffering in the airline industry. I'm interested in this airline. What can I do? Maybe I could be a pilot, and it kind of sparked this event. But it was a major event. And this coronavirus really has become a global event. This is not just affecting the airlines as well. This is also affecting all the industries. I mean, there's ground transportation, and there's the vacation industry, there's a hotel and hospitality industry. But for us, this is a killer of a job. And like you mentioned, Roger, Compass now, just hours ago, announced that they too are looking at shutting their doors. This Compass was a major carrier for the regional industry. And what are your thoughts on that?
Again, it's just one of those things that's extremely sad. You've now got a group of probably over 1,000 pilots between those two airlines, and just right there's 1,000, 1,200 pilots that are now going to be out of jobs. There's a whole lot to be said about, we talk specifically about the airline industry, but like you were mentioning, I mean, it's an entire, I don't even know what the numbers are. It could be 50% of the U.S. economy that is going to be affected by this when you're talking about restaurants. I mean, think about what's happening at restaurants right now. You've got all the restaurant owners and all the employees there, the hotel industry, the entire travel industry, the transportation industry. You're shutting down 50%. I mean, and don't quote me on that, but it could be, close to 50% of the entire United States economy. And there's going to be all these people, that obviously the federal government is now looking, even, yesterday and today, about how they're going to combat this, because they're looking at a huge amount of people that are going to be affected by this because the forward-facing economy is going to be so hard hit by this. I think fortunately from a pilot standpoint, and obviously I use that word very loosely in this context, but I think that travel will probably come back. Air travel will probably come back fairly quickly. In the end, this is a transient thing that we're going through. This will pass. Like most other things, this will pass, and I think that travel will probably rebound fairly quickly. But that's not going to be any help to those people who are receiving that letter that you were reading, those memos that are coming out. That's not going to help them right now, and it's a really sad thing. And I hope that we can all look out for each other. Although at the same time, there's not a whole lot that us as pilots, a line pilot, and then me being a private pilot, there's not really a whole lot that we can do about it, except keep from where I say keep them in our thoughts and prayers, because there's a whole lot of people out there that are going to be affected by this.
Yeah, for sure. And the news that the Compass closure comes from an article I was looking at, Flight Global, dated today by Pilar Wolfstiller. Compass Airlines, which flies regional routes for American Airlines as American Eagle out of its Los Angeles hub, will shut down completely on the 7th of April. The second U.S. regional carrier to fall victim to the coronavirus, according to the letter the employees say that they received. The airline, owned by Transstates Holding, did not immediately respond to a request for comment. On Tuesday, Transstates announced that its other subsidiary of Transstates, a regional carrier for United Airlines, would also shutter operations on the 1st. Demand has diminished to the point that American has made the decision to remove a large majority of American Eagle flights in the Los Angeles airport market starting on April 7th, which will effectively eliminate all our remaining flying with the start of the April 7th schedule. Chief Executive Rick Leach writes in a memo to Compass employees leaked on the 19th of March. Compass operates 20 Embraer-145 aircraft for American. All our remaining capacity will be completely cut for an indeterminate period, and our other once viable prospective opportunities have been tabled for the foreseeable future due to the sweeping impact of the crisis, Leach writes. We simply cannot keep an infrastructure in place without guarantees. The Indianapolis-based Compass had earlier planned to stop flying for Delta Airlines and Delta Connection at the end of the first quarter of 2020. As of yet, unaffected by the Compass and Transstates closures is the third subsidiary, GoJet, which flies the Bombardier CRJ 550s for United Airlines. U.S. airlines are seeking more than $50 billion in government aid to help them manage through the global health crisis that has gripped the air transport industry, with airlines slashing schedules following a sharp drop-off in passenger demand and government-imposed travel restrictions. So, here we are, the 19th of March. 2 regional airlines have been cut to the point of shuttering their operation. And this is a very scary time. Now, fortunately, I think for Nathan, you are operating for a wholly owned regional, which means for your regional to be affected beyond the schedule reductions and whatnot that you're starting to just now see, then I think you're pretty much in a good position. At least I hope that is the case. Being a wholly owned does allow some protections in the industry against simply cutting all flying and cutting all contracts. So, I mean, is this something that we're going to start seeing a trend in? Are other regional carriers to follow? I mean, these are going to be a lot of pilots out on the street.
You know, it's tough to say. Especially with nobody knowing everything. It's a fluid situation. It's why, a lot of companies haven't agreed to, contracts or stuff like that. I know Legacy has their agreement with their pilots for their temporary leaves of absence and whatnot. But the situation is so fluid right now. It's hard to tell. I had not heard about the Compass thing until, we talked about it before this. I knew they were giving us back their 175s that Legacy had given them. I guess I didn't know they were going to shut down. It kind of came as a shock to me. But I do see it. It could happen again. Especially with United and Delta. United's got a lot of transatlantic stuff to Asia. Delta's right behind them with that kind of stuff, and they're parking 600 plus aircraft and reducing their load, their flight cuts by 70%. And stuff I've seen over the past couple of days. It's kind of incredible. I just noticed the Americans said they were parking 450 aircraft.
Yeah, they're parking their 7576 fleet will be completely parked unless you saw something that's even more recent than that. While we're here, I'm looking at airlinepilotcentral.com just to get some numbers to give the listeners a kind of a scope of what's going on. Over at Compass Airlines, they had, as of last month, 478 pilots, all active, 0 furloughed. Their union was ALPA, the Airline Pilots Association. And they were flying for Delta Airlines and America Airlines. They had 37 ERJ 175s, 17 of which were Delta Connection, and 20 were flown under the American Eagle livery. They operated approximately 200 flights a day, and they have domiciles which were already trickling down to only Los Angeles, which was going to be effective April 1st. Transstates, however, they have a little bit more. They have 600 pilots, of which all were active up to a month ago. They also are unionized by ALPA. They have 48 Embraer-145s on the fleet, with domiciles in Raleigh, St. Louis, Chicago, and Denver. About a month ago, they were hiring, and they were giving $50,000 in fixed-wing training for rotor pilots that want to transition to an ATP. They were also giving $40,000 to fixed-wing pilots to build their hours for ATP minimums. So hiring went from paying for at least partial of your education, partial of your certificates. They were giving $60,000 signing bonuses with a total one-year compensation of $95,000. Just 30 days ago, they were giving a new hire $95,000, their first year pay compensation, to going to shutting its doors. It kind of bodes the question of what the hell is going on if they had that much money to offer new hire talent. They were so desperate for new hire talent pilots that they were giving them close to $100,000 a year. And we're not even 30 days into this crisis, and they've got to shut their doors. This is crazy. How do you run a company this way?
Well, I think that's one of those interesting questions that might end up being a little bit of a silver lining, if you will, is now you're having a little bit further consolidation within the regional industry as well. I mean, we've got a lot of regional airlines out there, and my heart goes out to those 1,100 pilots or so that you just mentioned. At the same time, you can look at some other regional airlines, and you're talking about a pilot workforce of 5,000 or so. And so I think that for the bettering of the industry in the long term, obviously not in the short term, but in the long term, that all the airlines will be better off for this. In a way, some of the major airlines might be. I mean, they've been trying to find a way to get rid of those Embraer 145s for quite a while, and now you kind of have a built-in way to in their defense go, there is no way for us to economically or financially support these routes. They can cut those routes. They get rid of those airplanes as well. And over the course of time, as they move into, whether you want to make the argument for better or for worse, but as we come out the other side of this in 6 months, even, I think is possible that they've made that they had a built-in mechanism to then transition to their 76, whatever, the Embraer 175, the CRJ 700s, and then the 900s as well. And so I think that in the end, it actually might be better in the long term. Unfortunately, long term is also, you got to look at it from a years out perspective and not something that's going to be better in the next several months. Even. At least that's my hope.
Yeah, and to that effect, what Nathan was talking about a little earlier about this additional cut that American Airlines has announced, and thank you for sending me that article here, from the Dallas Morning News, which is a great place to get most of your American Airlines news, being that they are based out of Dallas-Fort Worth. In an article entitled, "We Are in the Fight of Our Lives, American Airlines Cutting More Flights, Parking 450 Airplanes." And they were quoted as saying, "We expect demand to fall even more before it gets better," American Airlines President Robert Isom said in a letter to employees on Thursday. In this article by Kyle Arnold, from today, March 19th, only a few hours ago, American Airlines will cut its capacity even further in May and park nearly half of its fleet as travel demand continues to deteriorate from the global coronavirus pandemic. American Airlines President Robert Isom told employees Thursday in a letter that the company would cut capacity in April by 30% on domestic routes and 75% on international routes, with plans to reduce it even further in May. The Fort Worth-based carrier has now cut 55,000 flights out of its April schedule since the COVID-19 epidemic began. We are in the fight of our lives, and we will win, Isom wrote. Now is the time to come together and rally against a common enemy. American Airlines has about 130,000 employees, counting its wholly owned regional carriers, including about 33,000 employees at the DFW International Airport alone, and its nearby headquarters campus. The cuts are coming at an accelerated pace at American and our other airlines. Only a week ago, American said it was cutting 20% of domestic flights in April and 30% in May. And it's not the only one. Delta on Wednesday said it was planning a 70% reduction in system-wide flying until demand starts to recover. But it's really uncertain how long the recovery from this will be, said Gary Kelly, CEO of the Dallas-based Southwest Airlines, in a video to employees this week. And it is certain this will be far worse than 9/11 was. And that is a very scary statement, because we know that 9/11 created a lost decade in aviation. And although it did bounce back a decade into it, it was a very slow progression to go from the way it was before to the way it was 10 years later, which was pretty much a recovery, but it was never the same. That golden age of aviation was gone for good after that event. And it's very curious to see how we recover from this. Now, this wasn't an act of terror. This was and is continuing to be a health pandemic. No one really could have expected or anticipated that this would happen, unless you're Bill Gates. Bill Gates knew, and you know what I'm talking about. In 2015, Bill Gates had a TED Talk about what our next fight was going to be. He argued that it wasn't going to be a nuclear war. He said it was going to be a viral war, virus warfare.
If anything kills over 10 million people in the next few decades, it's most likely to be a highly infectious virus rather than a war. Not missiles, but microbes.
And I will put a link in the show notes to the video from 2015 where Bill Gates talks about how we are grossly underprepared, not just as a nation, but as a world, to handle the next pandemic. And we've never really seen anything like this, at least not in this generation. And we've seen these lists go on Facebook and Twitter and the social media outlets with all the charts, how this thing is nothing. It is only a drop in the bucket with all the other pandemics and, you know, the black fever and the swine flu and SARS and all these other contagion style diseases that went around in the world. Why are we freaking out? Why are we bringing our economy to collapse? And these are all very interesting debate topics to kind of get into. But here we're looking at how this is affecting aviation. And this is major. I mean, Southwest, Delta, American, United, Spirit, Frontier, all of them are in jeopardy here. All of them are cutting major cuts to this industry. And that is what keeps me up at night.
And I think that you're the last 5 minutes of that brought up a lot of questions. I mean, quite frankly, you could make an entire podcast out of about 6 different topics that you were just talking about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
The huge one being the 9/11 recovery and how this one is supposed to be way worse than that. Like,
yeah, that's scary.
That's scary.
And I think that there's gonna be a lot of differences between those two things. And I would actually argue that 9/11 didn't take a decade to recover it. You had a complete meltdown of the economy and for different reasons in the middle of that, which I think is going to be a big part of that. I think that 9/11 did kind of end that quote unquote golden age of aviation. I do think that the entire industry changed because of that, but I don't necessarily think that the recovery from it was a decade. And I think
it was a culmination of a couple things. Yeah, the 2008 economic crisis, the housing issues, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Of which, as we've talked about before, Tony, I remember them well because that caused a furlough. That caused a furlough for me, and hopefully I'm going to escape this one without having that same thing happen. But I think that the difference is the terror aspect. I think is that people were flat out scared to fly after 9/11, and I don't think that that's going to be the case here. I think that people are itching. I mean, if you just sitting up here right now, I can hear my two children running around downstairs who are about to kick the walls out in order to be able to go outside. And I think that there's going to be a lot of people. Travel will come back, and as soon as people are basically the government says, okay, you know what, the worst of this is behind us. I think that people are going to recover, that things are going to recover pretty quickly, and people are going to get out and they're going to go back to flying the way that they were. Is it going to be instantaneous? No, of course not. But I don't think that it's going to be with the same mental effect or psychological effect that happened after 9/11, because there was a lot of fear of, what's right around the corner, who's this guy sitting next to me or in the seat in front of me. And that's a very different thing that I think that we've got going on right now, which I think works in our favor. Now, unfortunately, there's going to be a lot of pain to go to get to that other side, but I'm at least fairly hopeful. In the grand scheme of things, this is hopefully less than a year. I mean, 6 months of our lifetime. Unfortunately, it's absolutely unprecedented how an entire world has been shut down over this, albeit even for only 6 months.
Yeah. And I really think that I think the magic pill in this scenario here is going to be the vaccine. So when a viable vaccine is created, marked safe, and then mass produced, that's going to take time, and then everyone's going to end up with a shot. And that could take a year, it could take 2. We don't know. But I think when that day happens, we're going to see a rubber band effect in the industry. We're going to just see, oh, well, I got the shot, so I can go on vacation. And look, everyone's hurting so much economically that I can go to Mexico for $10 a night in an all-inclusive, and I can fly for $10 to get there because everyone's so desperate for my business. So let's go. And that's both dangerous and good news as well. And the danger lies in, well, how long can the reactions to the economy of this scenario sustain themselves? And will that spark a mass flooding of the industry? And when that happens, if the pilots are in place to come back immediately, then we can have this rubber band effect, which is a good thing for us as pilots because we can get back in the seat, back flying, back making an income. If this is kind of a more drug out, slow process, then cuts are going to be inevitable and furloughs are going to be inevitable. And also, the weak business planned airlines are going to shutter their doors. And unfortunately, that's going to mean a lot of qualified pilots on the street. So it's a tough, very tough time to kind of react to this thing. We can't panic at this point. All we can do is just bring in the information, disseminate what we need to do as aviators to support our families and move on. And Roger, your industry is not, so far wasn't affected too much in the private sector, in the corporate sector, but this is starting to turn its head, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, the private aviation sector has been affected, albeit not so far nearly to the extent as the airlines, just because of the amount of people and the clientele that you're flying. You've got a lot of people packed into the airplanes at an airline, and that's been the whole push for the last couple weeks, is how to get as few people into any designated or defined place as possible. And in the private aviation sector, there's actually even been an uptick for a lot of the charter 135 carriers, because there are still industries and there are still companies who need to move people around the country and actually even still move people around the world. And if you are, trying to avoid airlines because of company policy or because of governmental intervention saying don't do it, or just for flat out fear, for those companies or even private individuals who have the capabilities to be able to financially support that and the necessity to do it, then you're going to have a little bit of an uptick in the private aviation sector, which is actually what has happened from a number of things that I have seen. Now, how long that's going to continue, that I honestly can't say. But when you have these individuals and corporations who have the ability to basically fly, I mean, we can fly an airplane around with 2 or 3 people, or with 3 or 4 people on it.
Yeah.
You've got the 2 pilots and you've got 1 person or maybe 2 people in the back, and we can do that. We can go to a small airport. We don't deal with security. We don't deal with any of those large crowds, and that is appealing to some people. Whether that is for necessity or, I mean, for lack of better terms, because they can.
Yeah.
And you can speak to whether for better or for worse, but there is that aspect which I guess from a positive point of view does support some things. Not nearly the numbers that the airline does with the airlines, the frontline workers, baggage, the airport workers, but there is an entire subset of aviation in the general aviation industry that is still actually doing not nearly as bad as the airline industry from all accounts that I've seen.
Yeah. And Nathan, you're at a position where you were telling me you're in the top, was it 10, 12% of the seniority list? Where are you sitting right now?
Yep. Like top 10.5%.
Yeah.
So wait, how long have you been there?
6 years. Not yet. 6 years in July.
6 years, and you're in the top 10%.
And the only people above him
out of 2,400 pilots.
Yeah, he was scheduled to come over to Legacy Airlines with the flow-through agreement in a few months, like literally in a few months in July. And so the only people above him at this point are those that we mentioned earlier, the lifers, the ones that, hey man, I make a good amount of money. Got the best vacation possible.
Still incredible to me to hear 6 months or 6 years rather will get you into the top 10% of seniority, just having been out of that for a while.
Out of 2,400 pilots, it's been a long road. No, not that long, really, honestly. In the grand scheme of things, you're looking at people who are sitting there as first officers for 8 years.
Yeah.
And I know you were one of those, Tony. You were sitting there for forever, and
yeah.
I was just before all this hit. I was talking with a friend of mine we were trying to map out how long it would take me to be a captain at Legacy, and he said it'll about 8 to 9 years from your first day at a regional to a captain at Legacy.
I hate to tell you, Nathan, but that figure is very conservative, because I before this whole thing happened, looking at my 2-year anniversary in April, and at the end of April, and I was 400 numbers away from an upgrade. JFK 737, 400 numbers away, and they had a huge vacancy bid. They do vacancy bids every quarter at Legacy Airlines. So within maybe a year, I could have easily have held a cap. Now I could have held a captain position on the 190 in Philadelphia, but captain pay, year 2 captain pay is identical to year 2 FO narrow body pay. So why would I want to commute?
You've had enough of those handlebar flying too.
Thank you very much. Things were in a massive uptick. I dare compare the way the airline industry was going to a housing bubble crisis that we went through years ago, where people were buying houses left and right, and they were super inflated with the cost of houses because people were outbidding each other hundreds of thousands of dollars over asking price, and it was just crazy because of all the predatory lending that happened. Then it just all kind of collapsed in what seems like an overnight process. Now, be it one may not compare to the other, as neatly as I would use for this example, but the airline industry was kind of doing the same thing. Here we had people upgrading, they were still in new hire class and they had some previous experience in a 121 operation and they were already a captain, if not a street captain. And they were making, $80,000, $90,000 year one pay to regional. Maybe it's their first regional job ever or 121 job ever. And the progression of pilots, I just read here at TransStates, they were offering upgrades as low as 12 months after hire date. So as soon as you had your about 1,000 hours, you were good to go. You're going to be a captain. They were moving along so fast. And I think it grew so fast and they were just throwing money at it to get the seats filled, to get those pilots hired, to compete with the pilot shortage that was there. And now these aspects might actually help us. The fact that there was a pilot shortage and that they were desperate for pilots meant that there weren't enough pilots in the pool. Now, here this is happening, a major event. There's going to be a lot of backlash in the short term, but in the long term, maybe that's going to help out in a certain aspect of the position in the career field, that maybe now things will kind of balance back and there won't be this giant wave of a collapse. Instead, it'll just be a little bit of wake that we just have to get through. So there's some interesting questions that come up and some interesting, dare I say, perspectives of how we're going to survive all this.
So yeah, I suspect you guys are both going to be fine. I'd put money within 2 years, you're going to upgrade. I still think within 2 years.
Do you think so? Yeah. I'm actually worried that I might get furloughed. I actually am very worried because if they let's just say they cut 30% of the pilots.
You could get furloughed too, but I don't think that they're mutually exclusive. That is the really weird thing about what's going on right now is that, I think that the problem with the airlines are going to find that, like kind of what I was talking to you about the other day, is to get any financial gain from doing a furlough, they need to furlough you for 6 months. But at the same time, like you were talking about, in order for them to ramp back up, they can't have you guys furloughed.
Right.
Because otherwise there's no way for them to get that.
Kind of a catch-22.
Right.
Yeah, they're in a catch-22 where they can't really let you go, but they're trying to figure out how to be able to afford to keep you, which is, I think, where they're coming up with this whole big 50 billion quote unquote bailout thing.
Right.
Which I think they probably do need to kind of figure out in some. I think it should get paid back in some way, but yeah, it really is a catch-22 because I don't think it's going to be all that long, and they're not going to be able to ramp back up.
Yeah. And also,
and whether that's reduced flying lines or whatever it happens to turn out to, but they got to figure out how to keep as many people on the line as possible so that when the swing comes,
it's going to swing hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really, once they get a vaccine out there, and I think that's the biggest thing right now is, you can quarantine everybody, but as somebody has it again, it's going to, just one person had it in China in November, and now it's all over the world. So as soon as you take everybody out of quarantine, one person has it again, there it spreads just like that. So waiting for a vaccine, which could be a year out, I think they have to all the testing they have to do with everything.
Yeah.
They say they have vaccines made, but they got to test the crap out of them still.
Well, we've been kind of as a family, we've been doing kind of movie nights. My daughter is homeschooled, so she really wasn't affected by all the school closures and whatnot like her friends were.
Right.
So she's still, doing all her regular classwork every day. But in the evening, since I'm home, my regular usual schedule, we've been doing kind of like a family movie night after dinner. And so we went through this like a little Contagion marathon. We watched the movie Contagion. We watched the movie I Am Legend, where I Am Legend, they found a vaccine.
Which is exactly what's going to happen here. Somebody's going to make a vaccine and it's going to turn everybody into zombies.
There's a possibility, and then we'll be like, oh, we need a wall.
Yeah.
let's not even go there. So yeah, hopefully the vaccine will come to fruition sooner rather than later, because that really is going to be the saving grace for a lot of pilot work groups. And hopefully, a
lot of work groups everywhere, really. Hotels, restaurants. It's gonna once that vaccine hits, it's gonna save just about everything.
And the eye really is on China and Italy, because as of right now, China I saw that they reported today that they have no new cases of the coronavirus.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So as of this morning, they had none, at least today. Who knows what it is tomorrow? And I don't know, that news could have been outdated from this morning when I read it to now, but they have no new cases of the coronavirus, and therefore their isolation, the way they did it, seems to be working. And, Italy and France now are starting to really get a lockdown, and us here in the United States, we're starting to lock it down. So it's possible that this is, last a couple weeks. And if the CDC determines that, well, we've done a good job at social distancing ourselves and isolating ourselves, and now the spread is in controllable numbers, then there's a possibility that even before the vaccine, that these numbers can slowly start to creep back up in terms of opening businesses and restaurants and whatnot. I mean, I was in Miami just 2 days ago on an overnight, and I had to go eat. So there was a little restaurant that I always go to that serves a wonderful Cuban food right across the street from the hotel. And I walked in there, and they didn't have any kind of restrictions. So I was able to sit down and have a meal there. And I made sure that I was sitting in an area that was not near anyone else. And every single time somebody got up, there was an employee there with a cleaning solution and a rag, and they were wiping every single table, the chair. I mean, I felt like I was in a sterile environment, and they were coming back and just cleaning as soon as the next person got up. As a matter of fact, when I sat down, I mean, everything was still kind of wet, and I had to kind of dry it off with paper towels and stuff. So they're doing a really good job across the country with trying to sanitize every surface of their establishment, because the last thing a business owner, especially a mom and pop, wants to do is close their doors. So I think if that continues, the hand washing continues, the social distancing continues, we can get a really good handle on this even prior to a vaccine. Does that mean that we can now gather in groups of bigger than 10? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. The fact that Costco is still open now, mind you, that could potentially be a slow reaction instead of the rubber band effect that we've been talking about. It's a possibility that it's a slow reaction, and that would minimize the need to furlough, the need to slow down the operation. And I want to thank both of you for spending the time with us today to kind of get your perspectives. Nathan, I know you've got dinner coming up here. Do you have much time left?
About 15 minutes left.
15 minutes left. So let's use that 15 minutes and kind of finish up a little bit with some one-on-one with you. Now, you've been a captain for a few years, and you're in the top 10, 12% of your pool there at the Sandpiper Regional. And you've lived through a few ups and downs. I mean, you've been around long enough to see them. What has been the biggest challenge for you, not including our current situation, thus far?
Biggest challenge for me, not including this situation. Oh boy. It was probably just starting out. My first year at the airline. Wasn't making a lot of money. I think I grossed like $24,000 that year. It was tough. I was married at the time, and she's now my ex-wife. We had 2 kids. And it was, we were asking for money left and right from our parents, her parents, whatever it was. And all I wanted to do was get out. I got in, I got to this dream job, and I was like, nope, can't do it anymore. I'm on reserve. This is terrible. I'm always at work, and I'm never home with the kids, with my wife, and couldn't do it. So I was looking to get out. I was looking to go to the FAA. I was looking to go to a charter place. I was looking to go back to flight instructing, anything. And then they came out with a contract for, that would include flow through. Things started moving. It took a while, and I moved up the reserve list. I was number 7 from the bottom for the first 8 months at Sandpiper.
Yeah, it
was tough. So things started moving. I moved up the reserve list. I got my first line, and then there you go. It's all been uphill from there, honestly. So making it through that first year with the low pay, which you don't have to do anymore now, well, who knows what's going to happen when we come out of this, but at least it was 3 weeks ago. giving you bonuses left and right. So that aspect of the industry where you're making no money as a first officer is pretty much gone. Other than that, it's really been fairly easy. The career itself has progressed nicely, like we talked about. It was building and building and building and building, and things were moving fast, and people were excited, and things were great. And then now you got this. So,
yeah. Well,
you really have that first year, and then 5 years of good, and then boom.
Yeah.
So it's a volatile industry we work in. And, we all know that, and it goes up and down just like we do in the airplane. So
yep. And you stuck with it. You saw that it was difficult financially. I feel your pain because I went through the exact same thing, making dirt. I've always said that I would have made more money working as a assistant manager at McDonald's flipping burgers than I did my first year at a regional airline. And thankfully, those days kind of dissolved away, and there's really no way to know if that's ever going to come back that way. But that's too far down ahead on the tracks to even worry about. And many professional aviators have learned this firsthand, how difficult it can be, to juggle the conflicting demands between their personal and their professional lives. And you kind of alluded a little bit to that. What do you think was your secret in balancing, and even today, the demands of family and the aviation schedules?
Well, it's tough. One of the hardest things to do is balance time away and time at home. You're by yourself in a hotel room, or maybe you're out with crew, whatever, you're drinking, having a good time, or you're on your phone or watching TV, and you just downtime. So when you come home, you really have to focus on putting your family first and making sure that you're spending quality time with them in the few days that you have off. You may be only home for a day, or maybe it's 3 days, or maybe you happen to have one of those months off because you're a senior and you got the vacation, but putting family ahead of your phone or ahead of the sports or whatever it may be, it can be tough to do sometimes because you're so used to just being by yourself in a hotel room. So that was one of the things that really hit me after, my first marriage that ended while I was still at Sandpiper. So then I met my now wife, and she was lucky to have met me when she did, because I was senior FO, getting the schedules I wanted. It was fine. And then she was with me through my upgrade training, and then being back on reserve. And I warned her. I was like, it's going to be rough. I'm going to be gone a lot. There's going to be 6 days where I'm gone and I'm only home for 2. And she's like, I know, it's okay. It's fine. But luckily for me, those reserve days as a captain were pretty short-lived. I was a line holder within, first flight as a captain was on December 31st. And I was a line holder in that June. So 6 months.
Wow. And you said that, she was lucky that she met you when you did. But, I'd have to tell you, and the next time I speak with her, I'm going to make sure I set her straight. You're the lucky one, my friend, because she is an amazing, amazing woman. You guys, the adventures you guys take and her personality, it's a pleasure to, get to interact as little as I have, that really has stood out. And the last question I'm going to ask you.
Yeah, I'll reword it. I'm the lucky one. Yes, that's it.
Yes, yeah. I just want to make sure, because she will be listening later, I'm sure.
Yes.
Just one last question before you go, because I know you've got. What do you have? What are you smoking, by the way?
I got a pork loin going. I got a dry rub, and it's been on there for coming up on 2.5 hours, almost 3 hours now. So.
I didn't get my invitation. I don't know. Must have got lost, huh?
Oh yeah. Well, I sent it yesterday. I don't.
Oh,
I sent it. Yeah, I don't know what happened.
Oh, that's okay.
Can you get here? You're in California?
I got a bunch of airplanes sitting at the airport. I'll just grab one.
Yeah, that's fine. I hear it. Americans parked a lot.
I'll drive down, pick up Roger. We'll jump in a 7.6, and we'll be right there. And then when the company asked me what the hell I was doing, I said, "Well, I heard about some dry rub." So
they were just parked. They weren't getting used, right?
Right. Exactly. But they'll probably say, "Okay, you pay for the gas," and no, that might not work. So one last question.
Yeah, that would be a little tough.
Let's say you can go back in time just for a moment, and you can whisper in your ear of a younger self as you're trying to start this career. what would you tell yourself?
That's a good one. There's a lot that I could say to myself.
What's the first thing that comes to your mind?
Just be prepared for anything.
Yeah.
You know, it's almost impossible to prepare for everything. But just get ready for the good times and the bad times, because they will all come, and stay the course. It's like I said, it's an industry that goes up and down, and you're going to go up and down with it. It might suck, but in the end, it's going to be great.
And I said that was the last one, but you reminded me of another one that I like to ask, all my first time guests. So think of one person in your life that has made the greatest impact to your success and your career in aviation. Who would that person be, and why?
There's a couple that come to mind. You're up there, to be honest.
Are you serious?
I think the person who, yeah, absolutely. I'm not even like trying to be corny for the show or anything. It's you're up there. You were, yeah. I talk about you still a lot of my FOs.
That's awesome, man. Thank you. I'm extremely, extremely flattered right now.
Well, there you go. I'm not all just jokes, right? But probably my dad. As corny as it is to call you on there, but my dad he told me from the beginning, he goes, it's going to be tough. You're not going to make a lot of money. You're going to get into a lot of debt. But he's been there just about every step of the way. Through my first marriage, through my first, my first and hopefully only divorce, through financial hardships, through upgrades, and through just travel, really everything. He's helped me through a lot. So
yeah, and that's wonderful to hear that you've had a parent available to you that has been such an inspiration to you. Thank you for sharing that with us. I also want to thank you for coming on the show today. I'd love to have you back to get your perspective in all this.
Yeah.
I'm sure future shows will have more of these conference style shows. For all the other podcasters out there, we're doing a conference style Skype Meet Now app, and it's been pretty good. I think hopefully the sound quality will be good for everyone. But a multi-call Skype call. This is a first time for us here on Squawk Ident. And Nathan, I just want to say thanks again for taking time out of your day, from being at home with the family to sit down and talk to me and talk to Roger and myself about your experiences and in your journey. And it's been a pleasure to have you on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I look forward to coming back.
Thanks, Nathan. It was great to meet you.
Yeah, you too, Roger.
All right, Nathan, thank you very much for being here today, and have a good one.
Thanks, Nate.
So, Roger, real quick, before we wrap it up, I just wanted to ask you, what have you been up to?
I've not been up to a whole lot in the aviation job industry arena.
Yeah.
Last I flew was about 2 weeks ago or so. We flew a normal flight out, taking the owner to where he was going with the intention of actually I was supposed to be gone this week, out on an international trip, and he canceled that. And ever since, he's just kind of been hanging out.
Yeah.
In Austin. Actually, he's just been hanging out in Austin, and the plane is out there, and the crew, we are in our own respective places, and at this point, just kind of waiting to see what he wants to do next.
Yeah.
He's in that category I kind of mentioned before, is he's got all the capability in the world to do what he wants and fly on his own private airplane. He's got residences in multiple places across the globe, actually, but he's choosing not to. Just for his own health, and to lower the risk, not just because he has to, but he feels that it's in his best interest. And so I'm basically on call. He did leave us with, if I decided I want to go somewhere, we'll do it. And so that's kind of what I've been doing. Although I honestly do not anticipate having to do anything until next week. Later next week, I think, is when he might try and come or go to a different house of his. But
Yeah.
Other than that, I haven't been doing a whole lot.
Yeah. So
Lots of news, watching lots of news.
this whole pandemic has affected you, but not in the way that it has affected most of the people in the aviation community. So you find yourself at home, you're still on the payroll, the owner still has an airplane, you can still potentially fly just as much as you were flying before, but because the interest of the owner, of the operator, decides that he wants to just kind of hang out at home, be with his family, and practice social distancing, that just means that you have not been required to go pick up airplanes and fly them around. But
Exactly.
so you sit in a pretty good position. And I think a lot of charter and corporate flying is going to be just that, because teams are going to need to still move around and do things. Although, I mean, right now it's all at a halt, but slowly it's going to come back. People are going to need to get to destinations, to do practices, or to seek medical attention, or whatever skill set they need to do. And it's usually a lot of traveling. So that'll probably keep flying, right?
It's such an interesting dynamic on the different subsections of aviation. Obviously we spent a lot of the past hour talking about the aviation or the airline aspect, which you guys were involved in, and how you guys have been profoundly affected. Obviously, getting hit on multiple sides, really. And then, I touched on kind of the private and the charter aspect, and those guys are flying a little bit more because there's a little bit of an uptick. I did see something specifically about Gamma and Wheels Up, about how Wheels Up is about how the inquiries into their service has seen quite the uptick. And so the charter guys are actually probably working a little bit more. And then there's me, who's kind of like, I don't really know how I feel. Like if you just look at it right now, it looks like I'm sitting pretty here. Like, yes, I still have a job. I'm still on payroll. The owner still has an airplane. It's not like he's going to get rid of this airplane anytime soon. I mean, even if he tried to sell it, it's going to take him 18 months to probably sell it. And he has no intentions to, because he'll go back to flying it. And so the crew is still on salary, and I'm not even needing to do anything. But at the same time, there's a little bit more fear for me, because especially being the age that I am, and graduating and into the Great Recession and losing my job that first time around definitely did impact how I feel, my whole psychology about jobs and economy and everything. Because now, while it kind of looks like I might, like, logically it looks like everything should be okay with me, I'm still very fearful that, in the end, I'm getting paid to not do a whole lot. I'm on call, but I don't, like, realistically, I'm not sitting here going, oh, I could get called to go somewhere tomorrow. Like, there's about a 0% chance that's going to happen, and I know that. And so, to me, being the kind of guy that I am, it's like, I'm getting paid and I'm really not even doing anything. How long am I going to be able to hold on to this? And so there's definitely still a lot of fear, but in the end, I do, realistically, I probably am in a little bit of a better position than the airline guys, to be frank, just because it's an individual, and he's going to be buffered by a lot of the immediate effects of this.
Right. And, and it's an interesting perspective. It really is the reason I wanted to have you on today as well, is to give your, side of the way it's affecting you. It's the way it's affecting your industry. And I do appreciate you, spending the time to give us a little bit of a perspective of what that's like for you. Yeah. So I know we went way over today. We had a lot of interesting topics to share. And I do want to say again, thank you, Roger, for being on the show. And congratulations. Roger is now a official Squawk Ident crew member. And let's just say congratulations, Roger, and welcome aboard the Squawk Ident crew.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the Academy for this great honor. And for you, Captain Tony, allowing me to indulge your listeners with whatever it is I have to offer.
Yeah, man. It really is refreshing because a lot of pilots out there have never really been in the corporate side of things. And, all they know is what they know, which is between being a flight instructor in general aviation and then getting a job, maybe flying a little bit of cargo for a little while, but then getting a job in the airline industry, and they're panicking. They're like, oh my God, it's all going to crumble. But for those pilots out there that are, say, at Compass or Trans-States, my heart goes out to you. If there's anything I could ever do, I'm there. But there's also an opportunity there that they could be applying at charter operators, corporate operators. It's going to be hard and it's going to take time. But, we were just not too long ago having a discussion on how that the corporate side of aviation was on short demand because pilots were leaving to go to the airlines because they knew they were going to upgrade quickly and they knew we were getting a good pay and it was all going to progress and happen really rapidly. And now the shoe is on the other foot. So
yeah, and those openings could be in a different side of aviation.
Absolutely. So there's plenty of opportunity up there, and we're here to just kind of bring perspective to it all and just say, hey, the journeys have always, if they've taught our listeners anything, is that the journeys are always filled with peaks and valleys. And this is just one of those valleys for most of us in the industry that we just have to kind of dig our way out of. So I thank you for your time, your perspective, and welcome to the official crew of Squawk Ident. Very excited.
Well, thank you very much, Tony.
Well, that wraps up episode 33 of Squawk Ident. I just wanted to say a big thank you to Captain Nathan for sitting down with us and joining us on this very exciting episode. We dove into his career path and progression, his journey along the way, and we also talked about this epidemic that's going on and how it potentially is going to affect many, many aviators here out on the line. And the number one thing, if you pull anything out of this episode, is to just please don't panic. The main focus here is understanding that we will get through this. This is uncharted territories, to say the least. And, through support and just being there for each other, we're going to get through this. Are you enjoying Squawk Ident? I sincerely hope you are. So please visit our website at www.aviatortony.com. That's Alpha Victor, the number 8, Romeo Tango Oscar November Yankee.com. There you can check out episode cover art, episode archives, the pilot shop. You can leave audio feedback. You can check out photos from the flight line. And very importantly, you can become a producer of Squawk Ident right there on the home page. If you scroll down, you'll see a place where you can add a either one-time donation or a monthly contribution that would really help us out with equipment and expenses and so forth to produce this podcast. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, it would really help us out if you would just spend a moment and leave us a review, a share, and a like. If you're on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, you can also search Squawk Ident Podcast or Aviator Tony and Squawk Ident. In closing, I'd like to say thank you for taking the time to listen to this grateful aviator. Keep the dirty side down, be safe, wash your hands, and take care of each other.